Every single country on Earth is drowning in debt. The United States just crossed $38 trillion, dollars, the highest in history, and climbing $1 trillion dollars every 100 days. China owes over $14 trillion, dollars. Japan nearly $10 trillion. Dollars. Germany, despite being an export powerhouse, owes $3 trillion. Dollars. Even oil-rich Saudi Arabia carries massive debt. But here's the paradox that should break your brain. If every nation on Earth owes money, who exactly are they paying? Think about it. The entire global economy owes $315 trillion. Dollars. That's nearly 4 times the value of everything produced on Earth in a year. But debt is a two-sided transaction. For every borrower, there must be a lender. So who's on the other end of this $315 trillion IOU? The answer isn't what you think. And once you understand it, you'll never look at money, government, or your own savings the same way again. To understand how we built a planet buried under $315 trillion in debt, we need to go back to where it all began. Not Wall Street, not Silicon Valley. War. The year is 1694. England is fighting France and running out of gold. King William III has a problem. His army needs funding, but the royal treasury is empty. So he turns to London's wealthiest merchants with a proposition. Lend me money now, and I'll pay you interest forever, backed by future tax revenue. The merchants agree, and to manage this arrangement, they create the Bank of England. This was revolutionary. For the first time in history, a government could spend money it didn't have yet, and in return, lenders received something more valuable than gold, a promise from the most powerful institution on Earth. That promise could be bought, sold, or traded. It had a market value. That was the birth of the government bond, the seed of everything that came after. France copied it. The Netherlands refined it. The newly independent United States adopted it to fund the revolution and later its expansion westward. National debt stopped being a sign of failure. It became a measure of power. The ability to borrow was the ability to rule. Empires once conquered territory to extract gold. Now they issued bonds to extract interest. The battlefield became the balance sheet. And 330 years later, that same system, born in war, now defines every economy on Earth. If you want to understand how this system really works, and more importantly, how to protect yourself when it inevitably breaks, you need to subscribe right now. Because what I'm about to show you next exposes the biggest financial illusion in modern history. The one that keeps you working, paying taxes, and saving in a currency that's built entirely on debt. Hit that subscribe button. Because the people who understand the system are the ones who survive when it resets. Let's keep going. Let's start with the United States, because American debt isn't just national, it's the foundation of the global financial system. Out of that $38 trillion, about $28 trillion is publicly held, meaning it's owed to actual investors, not just shuffled between government agencies. So who are these investors? Two-thirds are American institutions, U.S. banks, pension funds managing your retirement, mutual funds holding your 401k, insurance companies backing your policies, the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining third, about $8 trillion, sits in foreign hands. Japan holds $1.1 trillion, the top foreign creditor. China holds $775 billion. The United Kingdom, $710 billion. Luxembourg and Belgium, tax havens, hundreds of billions more. So when politicians say America is in debt to China, that's technically true. But it's only 2% of the total. The real creditor? America itself. Here's how the circle works. The U.S. Treasury issues bonds. American banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, creating new dollars out of thin air in the process. You pay taxes. Those taxes fund interest payments on the bonds. That interest flows into American pension funds and retirement accounts. You are simultaneously the debtor and the creditor. It's a closed loop, a financial Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. And this isn't just an American phenomenon, it's global. The circular structure of debt doesn't stop at America's borders. It's planetary. Japan lends to the US by holding treasury bonds. The US lends to Europe through the IMF and NATO commitments. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. Developing nations lend back to advanced economies by parking their foreign currency reserves in Western bonds. It's like a poker table where every player borrowed chips from the person next to them. And the only rule keeping the game alive is that nobody walks away. But here's where it gets darker. Behind every government bond sits a web of shadow institutions. Hedge funds managing trillions in leverage. Pension funds betting your retirement on continued stability. Sovereign wealth funds, Saudi Arabia, Norway, Singapore, controlling entire economies. Central banks creating money to buy debt from governments. These institutions are the real arbiters of power. They decide which nations can borrow cheaply and which will be crushed by interest rates. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall, entire economies get restructured overnight. Democracy decides who governs, markets decide who survives, and the ultimate market maker, the high priest of this entire system, is the central bank. Central banks don't just manage debt, they manufacture it. Every time the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. The government's liability becomes the bank's asset. The bank's liability becomes your currency. Here's the secret nobody tells you. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every dollar in your wallet, every digit in your bank account, represents a unit of debt somewhere else in the system. Money is debt. They're the same thing. When you deposit $1,000 in your bank, the bank doesn't store it in a vault. It lends out $900 of it immediately. That $900 gets deposited somewhere else, and 90% of that gets lent out again. Your $1,000 becomes $10,000 in the broader economy through this multiplication. But it's all built on the original promise, the debt, that started the chain. For decades, this loop has sustained itself through one thing: confidence. As long as investors believe governments will pay interest, even if they never pay back the principal, the machine keeps turning. But what happens when confidence breaks? We've seen what happens when confidence fails, and it's never pretty. Greece, 2010. The government's debt became unpayable. Bondholders panicked. Yields spiked to 30%. The European Central Bank and IMF intervened. But their rescue came with austerity, tax hikes, spending cuts, mass unemployment, pensions slashed by 40%, an entire generation sacrificed. Bailout became another word for punishment. Argentina. Repeated defaults over the past century turned debt into a national curse. Inflation has destroyed savings 9 times. The peso has been redenominated so many times that Argentinians don't trust their own currency anymore. Sri Lanka, 2022. When the government ran out of foreign currency to service loans, the entire country collapsed. Fuel shortages, food riots, the president fled the country. When the system breaks, the creditors suddenly become visible. The International Monetary Fund with its austerity demands, the rating agencies downgrading nations into oblivion, the anonymous bondholders who hold entire countries by the throat. And yet, even after collapse, the same logic restarts. New loans replace old ones. Old debts are restructured. The machine resets with a new name on the same balance sheet. Why? Because in the 21st century, debt isn't designed to be repaid. It's designed to be rolled over forever. Here's what they don't teach in economics class. When you or I take out a loan, we're expected to repay the principal. But governments operate on a completely different model. They treat debt like a subscription service, issuing new bonds to pay off old ones. Economists call this refinancing. But it's really just kicking the can down the road forever. Interest becomes the real product. The rent charged for stability. The United States will never pay off its $38 trillion debt. Not in your lifetime. Not in your children's lifetime. Never. Japan's debt exceeds 260% of its GDP, and yet Japanese government bonds still trade near zero interest rates. Why? Because investors aren't waiting to be repaid. They're waiting to renew the deal. Because government debt is the system. A U.S. Treasury bond isn't viewed as a liability, it's an asset, the safest collateral on earth. Pension funds hold it to secure retirements. Banks use it as reserve capital. Central banks treat it as money itself. If the U.S. somehow paid off every dollar of debt, the financial system would collapse instantly. Banks would lose their most stable asset. The dollar supply would shrink. Deflation would destroy the economy. Paying off the debt would kill the very thing that makes the economy function. So, governments do the opposite. They keep issuing more, not recklessly, but rhythmically. Debt becomes the heartbeat of capitalism itself. Here's the part they really don't want you to understand. When politicians say, we owe it to ourselves, that's only half true. Yes, Americans hold most of America's debt, but interest payments don't flow equally. They flow upward, from taxpayers and workers to the institutions and investors that hold the bonds. In other words, debt isn't just a transfer between countries. It's a transfer between classes. You work, you pay taxes. Those taxes pay interest on government bonds. That interest flows into pension funds, hedge funds, and the accounts of the wealthy. The system rewards those who own debt and punishes those who merely pay it. That's why global inequality and global indebtedness rise in lockstep. The more debt we accumulate, the more wealth concentrates at the top. This isn't a bug, it's the design. So who do we owe? The answer is everyone and no one. Debt has become money. Money has become debt. The line between debtor and creditor has blurred beyond recognition. Governments issue it. Banks multiply it. Investors trade it. And citizens, people like you, depend on it without ever understanding it. The modern financial system has turned debt into the operating system of civilization. But operating systems crash. And when confidence in the system finally breaks, when the belief that governments will keep paying interest forever finally shatters, the illusion ends. And we'll remember what debt really is, a promise that can't be kept forever. $315 trillion in global debt, 4 times the size of the world economy, all built on promises, all sustained by belief. The question isn't if the system breaks, it's when, and whether you'll understand what's happening before it's too late. If this opened your eyes to how the system really works, subscribe to the Wealth Forum right now. Because when the confidence breaks and the debt spiral collapses, you'll want to know exactly what happened and how to survive it. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.